Hello, everyone, and welcome to Elevate Strong Beginnings, Building a Professional Network. My name is Emily Ogier-Murray, and I oversee alumni relations for the NEAG School of Education. I have the pleasure of introducing our moderator, NELLIE SCHAFER, Director of Operations for Volleyball and Lacrosse for University of Oregon Athletics, as well as our panelists, Michael CORRAL, Associate Partner, Policy and Evaluation for Bellwether Education Partners, Simone James, 5th grade teacher at Roger Sherman Elementary School, and ROBERTO VALENTIN, Community Relations Account Manager at StarRez, Inc. I have a few housekeeping notes to share. This session is being recorded, but no comments will be shown. Closed captioning is available. Click on More at the bottom of your screen and click on Captions, then select Show Captions. During this event, please make sure to mute yourself and type your questions in the chat. At the conclusion of this program, you will have the option to join a panelist of your choosing in a breakout room for the chance to network. Lastly, a survey will be sent to you as a follow-up. We would appreciate it if you would fill out the survey and share your feedback. And with that, thank you all for joining.
Emily, thank you so much for kicking this off for us. Again, my name is NELLIE SCHAFER, Director of Volleyball and Lacrosse Operations at the University of Oregon. Very thrilled to be here amongst some very prestigious and wonderful alums from UConn that I have had the opportunity to know and meet through different areas of the NEAG School of Education, and really excited to have them share their experiences with you. So I'm going to go ahead and ask some questions. First, we'll start with them each introducing themselves, and we will go from there. So Michael, you're the first one I can see on my screen. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so hi, Nellie, good to see you, like the fresh gear, of course. Michael CORRAL, I'm based out of just outside of Portland, Oregon. I'm actually in Vancouver, Washington, and I finished at UConn in, I don't know, it's been forever. When were we there, Nellie? Like 2019, 2018, something like that. And yeah, so had a since graduating, kind of taken on some different roles, but my trajectory has landed me in a remote organization, and now I'm back in the Pacific Northwest. So yeah, I'll stop there, and happy to be here and hopefully engage in some conversation with everyone.
All right, Simone, throwing it over to you, please.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. So as you heard, I'm a 5th grade teacher at Roger Sherman Elementary School in Meriden, Connecticut. I'm in my 6th year of teaching right now. So yeah, I also went to UConn. 2016, I graduated with my bachelor's, 2017 master's, and then more recently, I completed the 092 program with UCAP. So now I do love teaching, but I do feel like I'm ready to start looking into some other leadership positions. So within my district, I do a lot of work around equity. I'm on my school's one of equity leaders, and in the district on a district equity leadership team. So just, doing a lot of work with supporting our efforts within equity and how that connects to curriculum, how that connects to climate and culture and different things like that. So for me, networking has been very important, especially now I'm actually getting ready to move to a new state. So I'm thinking a lot about how I can also connect with other people. And I'm looking forward to also hearing from the other panelists tonight too.
Awesome. I'm scribbling notes as we go and excited to connect about some things. And last but not least, Roberto, why don't we hear a little bit of introduction about you as well?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Roberto VALENTIN. I'm actually based out of Portland, Oregon as well. Michael, I had no idea that you were out here. That's exciting. I graduated from the UConn Higher Education Student Affairs Administration program in 2016. And since then, I've kind of trotted all over the US working within college administration, and recently finished my I won't say finish, put on pause for now, my higher education administration career at Portland State University here in Portland, running the residence life department and team, focusing on residential curriculum and DEI work. I now work for a company the last year or so called StarRez Incorporated. It is higher ed adjacent. It is a tech company. I'm no longer necessarily in the educational seat, but am in more of a community relations role, working with housing and conference teams across universities and colleges up and down the West Coast. So that's what I currently do.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for those great introductions. I'm really excited. I know Simone had said listening to the other panelists, but we all have a variety of diverse experiences. And I can probably say we all didn't take a direct line from point A to point B to where we're at right now. And so I think I'm just going to kick it off. And if everyone, Simone, I'll start with you, but if you could maybe think about your own skill set surrounding networking. I'm sure you've grown since you first hit the classroom. But could you talk about maybe what's your networking superpower and how you've honed in on that skill set so far?
For me, I would definitely say maybe making initial connections with people. In education, I feel like we're all connected through, through that skill of teaching, right? But it's also a heavily emotional job. I think there's a lot of emotional work there that you do with students. And, when you share that with other people, it's easy to kind of connect about those things. So I've really worked hard to connect with other people in other schools and other districts and even in other states. Because I feel like a lot of times, because the job can be so hard, you definitely need that support. So being willing to reach out to other people, getting to know them, and recognizing that, we do have a lot of things in common, even if you're not in the same grade level or same school, that sort of thing, but you have so much in common in terms of what we deal with students on a daily basis. So kind of just making that initial connection and finding those things that you have in common with other people that you can relate to, or even just learning about their story and finding connections within that as well. As somebody who is actually an introvert, that's something I've definitely worked at doing, but I find that it's so fulfilling when you can make those connections with other people.
That's great. And I agree with that, especially I'm assuming some of your initial connections also weren't just like, hey, how do you teach this subject matter? How do you do that? Would you say that when you're building these connections, they all happened initially in person, or did you have any moments where you reached out almost like a cold call, or like someone said, hey, you should really talk to this person, and you didn't know them, but you reached out to them? And if that has happened to you, could you maybe just talk about how you were able to develop that initial relationship with them when you weren't seeing them every day and didn't maybe know who they were?
Yeah, so I definitely had to make a lot of connections virtually online. I work with some other educators, and we do what's called Melanin Magic, and we've had a couple conferences, and we have like a social media presence. So having to reach out very often through those different platforms with other educators, or even, hearing about somebody who's maybe doing something special wherever they're at in their school, and just reaching out to say, hey, I hear about what you're doing. I want to learn more about it, or just even saying like, that's really inspiring. Sometimes it's not even asking about advice or asking for something, but it's just, sharing that you see what they're doing, that you recognize it. Because sometimes people even just need that little encouragement too. But oftentimes it's been, online, that sort of thing, virtually, just to check in and recognize what they're doing. And I've definitely been able to make a lot of relationships in that way too. I'm just kind of continuing afterwards. So after you make that initial connection, and then following up and saying like, oh, how's this thing still going? Or I hear about this event, or I thought you might like this book, or whatever it is that connects to what they do. So it's not even like you always have to, be having a long conversation, but just checking and following up and keeping that initial connection as well.
I definitely think that's a superpower. It's so important, especially I feel like can be people thinking you're networking just to get an end result, when it's really just to get to know someone. And I feel like some of my best networking relationships, Simone, have come from when it's not even about like the sport industry, but like, oh, your dog just turned 3. Like, you were talking to me about your dog, you had a dog birthday party, like just different things that we picked away in conversation. So I think that those nuggets you just shared are really important and impactful, especially when you're seeing what other people do and you're recognizing that and validating them. I think that's really huge in our industry as a whole. And Michael, I'm going to kind of throw it over to you and just see, where do you feel like your superpower is, especially with your vast experiences as an educator and a coach and administrator, then working for a nonprofit, then being a PhD student, and in the classroom, you've you've had to touch a lot of different individuals. What would you say is something that has stayed the same no matter what hat you are wearing as far as networking superpowers go?
Yeah, so similar to Simone, I'm a big time introvert slash hermit slash shy. And so that doesn't always work in my favor or to my advantage. But what overcomes that for me is I always have questions. I have lots of questions. And so my path is built up of a lot of different stops and pieces that I didn't know answers to, but I wanted answers to them. And so I would say that my superpower, who is just being inquisitive enough to like ask the question. So I see somebody, for example, I can think back when I think about my PhD, it all started with me seeing some school administrators in my district in Phoenix, Arizona, and saying like, how did you get to where you got? Like, I want to be like you. And then that turns into like a bunch of pieces of information that gives me more questions, and then I ask. And then honestly, like even the PhD in Connecticut, I have no connection to Connecticut. And I had no idea what going to graduate school, aside from getting, different teacher credentials meant. And so even going to graduate school was just a series of questions around like, why would I do that? What do you do? What is a PhD? What does it mean to go to school full time? How do you fund it? Where do you get funding from? And here's my story. This is what I'm passionate about. Like, does this fit anywhere in a PhD program? And, I could go on through the different stops, but it all kind of plays out the same way. I'm curious. I see something or someone that I'm like, that looks really cool. And I hope I would want to do that someday. And I set up that conversation or reach out to them, and that just opens up more doors. And then part of that path is being willing to step through those doors. I think a lot of people become comfortable, and that can be a challenge. And luckily I was in points of my life where I had a lot of flexibility. I didn't have a family yet. I didn't have a partner. And so it was not as challenging for me to step through those doors. But, from Phoenix to Connecticut, I packed up my whatever fit in my car and I shipped out and went. And that's one example of like, there was a door that opened up with the Dr. Jennifer McGarry, and I said, she believes in me, and that's all I needed to know. And I went. And so I think just being willing to take a little bit of a risk into the unknown sometimes. But at the root of that is asking a lot of questions that I'm curious about.
And boy, do I remember a lot of those questions that you asked me when we had class together. So that man had a lot of questions. It was super helpful though. And Roberto, I saw you nodding your head when he was talking about a lot of his points. Some people maybe don't have the confidence to switch or go into the unknown. We all have packed up various areas. 3 of us on here are Pacific North, all in the state of Oregon right now. But you made the change from higher education and now are a community relations account manager. That seems like very stepping into the unknown to me. Unsure the journey, but would love to hear more about it. But why don't you talk about your superpower? And then I would love if you would start kind of taking us into the next segment of how did you navigate your network from going from what might have been mainly higher education networks and mentors to utilizing them to get in your current role as well. And even, I guess, navigating that change in your career.
Yeah, totally. You may need to remind me which question I'm missing, but I think to start off, I think a networking superpower that more folks should really try to hone in on is mentorship programs. They are very, very important. And I feel like you can find them in very different circles. So I think for me, it started in undergrad. I went to DePaul University in Chicago, my hometown. They had DePaul this freshman program called the Men of Color Initiative. And it essentially allowed for folks identifying within any sort of that spectrum to be able to connect with professionals at the university, faculty at the university, and fellow students, right? Other young men that were really trying to connect and figure out, what the path looks like. That helped me greatly in trying to figure out what I wanted to do during my undergraduate years. And that actually propelled me to what I ended up doing at UConn, right? Deciding to go to Connecticut, driving all the way out there, right? Not as far as Arizona though. And once I was at UConn, really finding where my niche was, figuring out what is the work that I want to be doing 5 years from now, right? And who are the folks that are already doing that work? And I think someone had some great examples, so I won't, double up on that, but reaching out, right? And connecting with those people. Ultimately, I would say with that flexibility, right? I was very privileged, did not have a family, did not have a significant other. And I had really ate a lot of cans of beans and PB&Js and aggressively attacked my student loans at UConn because part of my assistantship had housing in it. So I was greatly privileged leaving that environment to be able to jump around and follow essentially where I knew people that could connect with me. People that, I had this mentor, Edwin Darrell at DePaul. Well, he knew, Anne-Marie Klotz at NYU. And so being able to make those connections for me came through mentorship programs. So highly recommend, happy to talk more about that. So I worked my way up to a director level within higher education administration work. Great, rewarding. I essentially achieved what I had sought when I first got to UConn. And realized at that time that although the work I was doing and the change that I was affecting positively into the world, right, it wasn't going to be enough for me to be able to sustain what my personal life was and what it is that I'm trying to do as a gay Latin millennial man trying to have a family in the United States of America today. So being able to start a family meant that if we, really enjoyed living in this area of the world, that we felt most at home and at peace and at comfort here, and also be able to go out and to the wilderness like we do out here in the PNW, that meant that I had to find a different career. And that meant that I was running out of my options to stay in higher ed. So ultimately, I was able to connect with past coworkers that I had at the University of Chicago, who had made the jump into the ed tech world. I did a boot camp, trying to learn a little bit of coding. It took a lot of time after hours during the pandemic, working on a college campus, to really hone in on what is it that is going to allow me to have a child, before I turn 50 years old. What am I going to be able to do to make sure that, our home life is balanced in a way that wasn't eating up as much of my time. So I think there's a lot that goes into that. I also am not saying I would not go back to higher ed. I do miss that environment and working with students specifically. But ultimately, at this stage in my life, the position that I have now, I am able to utilize those resources by having connected with folks that I had networked with previously, who were also in higher ed, to get to where I am now, working in a more corporate role.
I think that's great. And I feel as if, and I know Michael the most, given we were in the same area at the School of NEAG, but I feel, in your story and other people's stories, your needs change so much. And as you grow as a person, you meet people in your mentorship circles, and what was once a dream or something that you wanted to go through, you have other individuals you have to account for now, or other needs and desires. And I feel like that's one thing that I took away from when I felt late to the game in my networking, because I didn't join my first professional organization until grad school, and it was Women Leaders in College Sports. And Simone, after this little anecdote, I'm going to throw it over to you, because I'm very fascinated by your involvement in your professional organizations. But a speaker had mentioned that it was really important in your mid-20s to build what she felt like was your personal board of trustees. Like, who are the people that you look to, that you seek advice from? And it can be like 2 people, it can be 5 people, but almost like your own CEO. Like, you all are the CEO, you're the CEO of your life, but you have a board of directors, trustees to help you. And you really value their thoughts and opinions, because a lot can happen in a short amount of time with your career. And that's something I took really seriously and thought, it's really important to have mentors. But now looking on the side I'm in, really important to be open to being a mentor as well, because I definitely didn't get here on my own. I worked for 5 different universities in many different athletic departments and programs. So I think that's just what I took away from a professional organization, that sometimes I'm changing out who those people are. But I do feel like the mentorships and the getting involved in different organizations is pretty key to a networking. And so Simone, I want to talk about how you got involved, because it looks like from your resume, you started maybe as a participant, then got into a leadership role. And I believe at the very beginning of this call, you mentioned you're moving, but 2, you might be looking at something else based on passions maybe that you got from being involved on those committees and as the equity committee chair. So I would love if you could spend a little bit of time talking about how you found the organization you were a part of and how you capitalize on those opportunities and now are utilizing it.
Yeah, so I always feel like my I guess journey in equity work really started at UConn with leadership and diversity. And so I was just, going to meetings and such. And then I became a secretary, and it was actually Justice Lopez who asked me, "Oh, you want to be secretary? You sure? Like, be secretary?" And I was like, "Okay, I'll say yes." And then, being as a part of that organization, we had so many opportunities to go to different conferences and just meeting different educators and people who were, writing books and having, just really doing really great things in education and specifically within equity, and making those connections and building those relationships. We were then able to have some of those same people come to UConn and be speakers for our conferences for leadership and diversity. So like Christopher Emden and oh my gosh, Dr. Bettina Love. So that really for me was kind of the catalyst for me in equity work and just seeing how important it was for us as students, but really for me personally within my own journey as a student, as a Black woman, as a first generation college student, as a first born American, like my parents, came here and education was so important. Just thinking about how I felt like as an educator, my students really needed that type of support that I was able to have. So when I became a teacher, in my first couple of years, my role was, just really in the classroom. But I remember I had a conversation with my principal during my first interview, actually. And I mentioned to her these things that we had been doing at UConn. And she said how she was interested. But, it's your first year teaching. You're just trying to, survive or whatever. And through the years, our district has, done a lot more to put in place different equity initiatives and things like that. And having had those, I guess, connections and really putting our work out there, the things I had done at UConn prior to becoming a teacher, I feel like they saw, okay, there's some knowledge. I'm not an expert in any sense of the word, but there are some things that I had to offer, and speaking honestly, like advocating for myself and speaking up to say, hey, like I would love to be a part of these things that you're doing. I really think I have something to add to this, and I want to work with you. I want to work together to make some changes, here for our students. And over time, then we developed the equity committee within our school, and we have the district leadership equity team. So making changes district wide, but every step of the way, really trying to stay connected to other educators and what is happening outside of our district, what is happening outside of our building. And the connections that I made, prior to going into Meriden is really what I think for me informed so much of that, because you learn about things that people are doing, like I said before, like these great things. And you're like, well, why can't those things happen here? So being willing to bring those ideas and, all those sorts of things to the table. And then, as I mentioned before, so I work with 4 educators, and we have put on a conference, Melon Magic Educators Conference, for a couple years now. And we have like a small Facebook group and things like that. And 3 of them are women I met at UConn. And then one educator, she's actually in South Carolina, so not even within the state. But having that connection as well, again, hearing what's happening outside of my own district, outside of our state of Connecticut, but then also just having sort of that group of support, because especially as a Black woman, it can be so, because it could be really lonely. You know, I'm one of 2 women in my school, a Black woman in my school, and in the state of Connecticut, it's like 10% teachers of color. So it can get very, very lonely. And when you have certain things happening, you don't really have, you know, somebody to turn to. So having that network of people who, you know, have similar experiences to you and really can support you when you're going through something, or you can really support them when they're experiencing whatever it is, has been really, really powerful. But all of that really stemmed from those experiences at UConn, and then really working to keep those connections. I feel like you asked something else too, and I talked so much, I forgot.
Oh, no, that's okay. I just, I was curious because you talked about you're moving and potentially
Yes.
transitioning. So I wasn't sure. And obviously it doesn't need to, this is being recorded. If it's not public knowledge, we don't have to talk about that, but I'm just curious if your network played a role in the new opportunity that you are going to be positioning yourself in.
Yeah, so it actually really did. So one of my good friends from UConn, Tracy, we went through the UCAP program together. She was like, I think I'm going to apply and do it. I was like, you know what, if you're doing it, I'll do it with you. We can support each other through this. And so that's why I decided to go ahead and get the 092. And then afterwards, like this past year, I learned that I'm going to be moving. My husband got a fellowship in another state. So not really my choice, but we're going to be moving to Philadelphia, actually. And so I have definitely, you know, really leaned on the connections that I've made through UConn, you know, and with, you know, from my friends, and thinking about, okay, well, what are some positions? What are some opportunities that could be an option for me now that I have this? Because they're also doing kind of the same research and thinking about, well, what could be the next steps now that we have this certification. So that has definitely been a great help and great support in thinking about what might be next for me. I don't know what exactly it's going to be, but just, you know, having somebody to bounce those ideas with, having somebody to even like working on our resumes together, working on cover letters together, and what, you know, all that stuff is hard work. So just having those connections and, you know, having that support has been really, really helpful. And then staying in touch with the people that I've met, even just through this UCAP program, and thinking about what are some possible job options, or even, you know, do you know people in this new city that I'm going to? And people have been so gracious about connecting me with people that are already there, and knowing that, okay, I know you're doing your thing in Connecticut, and this is what you have to offer, and, you know, making those connections, say, okay, this is what they're doing there, and this is how you connect. So it's been really, really helpful and really comforting to know that there's people that are, you know, they're not looking for anything, you know, for me to give back to them, but it's just really wanting to help and wanting support. That has been really, really great.
Wonderful. I'm excited about the next journey for you. We can talk offline. I have some Philly folks in mind, but also I would just say they're not ready to talk about the Super Bowl loss yet. So just don't bring that up yet. I
Yes.
a couple of people on my staff from Philly. They're just not ready for it. So, Michael, I would love if you would be able to kind of talk to us a little bit about some lessons that you've learned in networking. I know that you've talked a lot about asking questions and how that helped guide you to answers, but is there something as you've evolved from when you first started and were very inquisitive in Phoenix to where you're at now, that where you decided to change up how you networked, and what that might have looked like for you?
Yeah, I don't know if much has evolved. I think at the root of me asking questions is also just having a genuine interest in building a relationship with people and cherishing those relationships. So I think it was Simone was mentioning, or maybe it was you, Nellie, that like where you are today is not because of actions you made individually. And that is my story as well. Every move I've made, there's been a community of people behind me, whether it was as a child with my family, whether it was as an educator with mentor teachers. Like I've always sought mentors and appreciated those relationships. And so when along my journey, when I've reached out to connect with people or just asked questions, it's always in a sense or in an approach where, yes, I want to know your cheat code. Like, how did you figure out this equation? But also, like, how can we build this relationship? Like, what can I do? What things are you researching? What things are you interested in? How can I support your journey? And as I've gone through the process and built these different networks. So from just being an educator in Phoenix, and then you think of a social network, I know that's a prompt on here, like LinkedIn, and just having like that context. Like I've always been like, oh, here's a position. I know my friend's looking for a position at Phoenix as an elementary teacher. Like, let me send it to him. I think like my alter ego is a headhunter. Like I love connecting people with opportunities. And like, as my circles have grown in terms of like outside of Phoenix, and then from a school system, outside of the school system, and working in policy and evaluation, just always being able to come across opportunities. And really the only social network I'm engaged in is LinkedIn. And I wouldn't even say I'm engaged. I kind of sit in the background and just watch things, but I love that because I have so many connections now that I see a lot of opportunities, and I love just like being able to connect people to those. And sometimes they come, it amounts to something, and other times it doesn't, but I love being able to kind of contribute to, or contribute in a way that other folks have helped me, like it contributed to my success, like because people have done that for me, like, hey, here's an opportunity. Hey, here's graduate school. Hey, here's how you can get school paid for you with a fellowship. Hey, here's you know, X, Y, and Z. And so I've really taken that and just kind of embedded in me that practice of like, hey, when I see something and I know someone that's looking for something, like they don't need to ask. I don't need to be looking for something in return. Just like, hey, I saw this. I think you'd be a great fit, like, and leave it at that. And I get a lot of fulfillment from that. And I think just holding those relationships with a very high value of like, we haven't talked in a few months, but I know you're looking for something and I saw this. Hey, just thought I would get this over to you. And again, at the root of that is just so many people have done that for me throughout the years. And so being able to do that now is just has been a gift.
And I think that's a great thing to bring up, and a different side of networking you don't think about. It's always like, oh, you're trying to network with someone to get to the next spot or like learn a lot. But I feel like where we're all at in our careers, I am constantly thinking about people that I would consider my inner network. Like I have different, like, I guess, circles of people who I keep up with, or circles from different places I've been to. But I love that you said, like, you think about other people, because I'm sure all of the panelists, someone could say, Simone might get asked, like, if she's leaving her position, who would you hire, like in mine, and Roberto as well, for when you were leaving Portland State. And so I think that's really a great point to bring up, Michael. I'm glad you brought that up. And then Roberto, I think I'm going to go back to the higher education standpoint really quick, from you working with young students. Don't want to make any assumptions of who's on this call, but know that it's UConn's current students and alumni. But what would you say that you've seen in talking with groups that are fresh in their careers or trying to get into their careers? What would you say are some do's and some don'ts that you've witnessed from a networking standpoint? I'm sure we can all think about an email someone sent to us, no capitalizations, like, hey, what's up? I want to talk to you, get me a job. But do you have any, I guess, words of wisdom for this group of like, yes, when you're going to network with a new person, this is really important, and please steer clear of doing this?
Yes, definitely. I have a lot. I think the first thing I'd say is do not be George Santos, because you're going to be found. And I think that speaks very poorly if you are presenting, essentially, if you have had some experiences or want to list that, you got this certificate, or, really embellishing an experience. There's a difference between doing that and actually having had that experience, right? So I think one of the things that I see often is a need to take kind of an achiever mentality that, I'm doing a whole lot. I really want to get to this next point. I see that other people may have more than I do, and they're going for that same job, or that same internship, right? So those 2 weeks, right, I worked in the Dean of Students office. I'm going to turn that into my resume and say I had an internship, 3-month internship over the summer, working directly with the Dean of Students at the University of Chicago. You have to be able to back that up. And so I think my advice, and I know I want to make sure I'm saying this because it happens often, right? Your experiences that you have are very valid, right? what you bring to the table is what's going to make you really, really good for that role that accepts you. I would say too that if you are reaching out to someone through professional networking, maybe it's someone that is not a direct contact, but maybe a secondary contact, make sure you have a resume ready. It doesn't mean that you have to throw it at that person, right? At LinkedIn, but I get this all the time. And I love being that person, right? Former students, former RAs, people coming to me and asking for a reference for something. I ask them to send me their current resume because it may have been a number of years since we worked together. And I'm going to want to interview you on what you've done since then, right? Because I care. And I want to be able to pitch for you in a way that's also authentic to my experience with you. The other thing too that I think on the other side of that is connect with people that know you. Connect with people that know what you've done and achieved, your champions in your corner. Have them look at your materials. Those are the people that are going to be able to push you on that other side. Maybe there's some imposter syndrome, right, that you're experiencing. Or maybe it's, you know, I really don't want to like overstate something too much. Bring in a former supervisor, right? Bring in someone that you maybe know really well, but doesn't know your experiences. And so that they can look at this and they can ask you questions. Because oftentimes, right, at least working in education and students in education, there are kind of these extremes of like, well, I've got to like almost flat out lie to get to this next job. Or I really don't want to like put too much on my resume because I don't know if it's relevant, right? So I think it does not hurt to reach out to your board of trustees, right? Those people that are in your corner to also support you through that experience and preparing for your materials. I think I've touched on quite a bit, but
Yeah, no, that was great. I think all valid points. I think really, it's hard when you want to get a job. It's a wicked competitive. And I feel like when early on in my career, I did a lot of comparing to other people. And I remember I was at a networking event and someone asked me if I knew someone, and the answer was no, like I didn't. So I was like, no. And I wasn't sure if I would like, did I not do my research? Is that like the president of this company I'm at? Like, I wasn't sure. No, they were just asking me if I knew someone that went to UConn. And so I think like along with what Roberto said and being able to back it up is being honest in networking is really important. I have, when I I've been able to work for a lot of universities that have great brands, the University of Connecticut, University of Oregon, got this University of Oregon. I felt like people came out of the weed work on LinkedIn and people I haven't talked to like in forever, asked for gear, asked if they could come visit. And it was really interesting to just decide who I was going to pour time into and who had been with me the whole time and giving me advice when I didn't get the job offers, when I got the no's, and who was just kind of new. And so I kind of want each of you to touch on, because sometimes I would feel very overwhelmed of, I met this person, I'm meeting this person, but how do I keep those relationships going? Like, do I need to make a checklist that says like, okay, I talked to Simone like 2 months ago. It's about time I sent a text, say, hey, thinking about you, or what's going on. So could you each maybe think about your relationships and your networks and how you go about, I don't want to say keeping them fresh, but how you go about keeping them lively, like keeping them not so when Simone needs to reach out to, or Nellie needs to reach out to Simone, it's because, well, Simone told me in an informational interview 5 months ago, this was something that she was interested in. Now I'm interested in it, or I need something. So it's about time I hit back up Simone. How can you keep those relationships authentic? And so you get into a place like Michael, where he thinks of a job and he wants to send it to you because he thought you might like it. So that question makes sense. It was a little Midwest wordy of me. I apologize. But Simone, I'm going to start with you though, because I see you first.
Yeah, sure. I think for me, I think this is where social media is like a really good tool, because it helps you to stay connected to people and kind of depending on how much people share and stuff like that, but you get to see kind of things that are going on in people's lives. And I'm somebody who definitely appreciates like, you know, people reaching out to even just say, like, say if I posted a birthday or whatever it is, like even small things, like just taking that small moment to say, I don't know, happy birthday, or I saw that this happened in your life, congratulations, or I'm so sorry to hear that happen. Like, to me, those small moments really do matter. A lot of the people that I've made connections with over you know, the course of my career, they're very, very busy people. And I've realized that not everybody wants to, you know, wants to have a long phone call or a long conversation. Sometimes it's okay. They just are really okay with like a quick check-in text. And so I think, you know, as you get to know somebody, I think realizing those things about people too is pretty important, like what ways they receive that communication or what ways they appreciate you know, people checking in with them. But I definitely try to acknowledge those small moments that I see that other people might have, even if it's like they share an achievement that they just experience, you know, sharing that with other people. I think those things really do matter, just like you said. So it's not like all these months go by and then, oh, I want to ask about this connection or this job or whatever it is, and then now I'm popping back up. But, you know, showing that genuine interest, you know, you're not necessarily trying to, you know, bank time so that when the time comes you need them, you could do that. But it's showing that genuine interest in people and maintaining like those authentic relationships, because I think people realize those things about people's character, like, you know, that you do care to check in, that you do care about how they're doing, and just making the time to make those small connections over time. And sometimes taking the time to, you know, maybe check in and say, hey, do you want to have a phone call real quick? And I want to catch up, or that sort of thing. And just so you're asking just, hey, how are you actually doing? Because everybody has things going on. But to be honest, I also am somebody who has to sometimes put it in my calendar, like, hey, check in with this friend, check in with that, because I'm just that type of person. But it's because I want to, it's that important to me that I do want to do that. So if that is something that you need to do, like that's okay too. But I think making sure that it's authentic and it's because you care about that person, not just because you want something from them, is really important.
I think those were some great nuggets there that you shared. Definitely the calendar I use a lot. The conversions of the time, being on the West Coast, that one's thrown me a little bit. So simple math, I got to work on that. But Michael, anything that you think to add to that and how you keep up with people in your network?
Yeah, I would say that I've just always had this mentality of just growing up where I grew up in my family dynamic, that nobody owes me anything. And so for the folks that, as I was younger in my career, that I connected with, that I aspired to be like, or figure out how they got to where they got and try and reenact that path, I make sure to show genuine interest in them, similar to what Simone was saying. I think for me, it's like, if they matter that much to me, if they're people that I want someday to maybe invest some time in me, whether it's like support me with figuring out what to add to my resume, or how to reword something so it fits this role, or to connect me with somebody else in a career. Like I don't want to come to them out of nowhere and just ask for that support. Like I want them to feel like there's a relationship there, that they're happy to do it. Because again, nobody would owe that to me. And I don't think that anybody should owe that to me without having some sort of investment in me as well. So for me, it comes a little bit more natural, I think, to just stay in touch with people. And I will say I have a lot of friends and family that does not come natural for it. So I want to say, like, this is not a challenge for me. Like I enjoy just like touching base with folks, just saying like, hey, how are you? How's the fam? Like, what's good? And I will do that. And I will also just put this out there, like some people, that's very hard. Their mind doesn't think that way. So if you are that type of person that it doesn't generate in your mind to like, hey, I actually haven't heard from or seen, or I've seen a couple posts from XYZ and I didn't respond, didn't check in. Like there should probably be a system in place if you really genuinely care about that relationship, so that you do. And I think that's something each person needs to figure out for themselves. Like, do they have a habit that enables them organically just to want to touch base with people, which is especially with text messaging. People don't expect a phone call from me. I'll tell you that much, but text message, yes. Or are you not that type of person? And if you're not, figure out a system to make sure that, especially when you're younger in your career, that you're checking in on people, and especially with people that are going to support your career or that can potentially support your career, that you're really trying to work towards a genuine relationship with them.
And Roberto, anything else to add after?
A lot has been said. I just want to say Michael is describing me. So for those of you that, this isn't natural, I think the way that I have approached this in my life is your network can be like an accordion, right? It can be this big and sometimes it's this big. I think Nellie mentioned something about like keeping a list, right? Of like, who's in the inner circle and who's not. And I think for me over time, that has grown and shrunk, right? Roles have also been reversed, right? I am now giving, right, some advice or reviewing resumes for former supervisors that I've had who are maybe in my network. I think the important thing too is that when you are reaching out, I also have this maybe holistic idea that when people reach out to me, I am responding, right? They don't owe me anything. I don't owe them anything. However, at once upon a time, we may have worked together. This person was in the same fraternity I was in. And so that is the entry point that they're making to me, right? So I make that commitment back to just say, yeah, sure, let me look over this. I'll get it back to you in a week. And then that's it. And that's okay, right? I think you're going to find that approaching networking from a broad stroke is going to be intimidating as you progress in your career. I think when you're in an undergrad and really starting to get out there, you can do that pretty easily once you practice that. But after a while, you really start to have to learn that you need to give as much as you are receiving, but also don't put yourself in the situation where maybe 3 years have gone by, zero communication. You see someone's posted a job, they're like, hey, I know you worked there at one point. Can you connect with me on this? You got to be okay with that person being like not responding, or maybe they're going to ask you to talk to someone else. I think it's about being open and understanding that each connection you may have in the network looks very different.
And I think you all touched on it to some degree. It's okay if it changes, just like our needs and wants changed and what we are thinking we would be in a professional industry and what we need and want. And I just feel very inspired by you three, kind of refreshed a little bit. I think that's another thing, thinking about networking, just it can get exhausting at times. And I know it's something where I personally don't feel like the networking has to stop. I'm not at my end all be all career. I can still give back. I can still each one or lift as we rise type of mentality. But I feel very refreshed in seeing you fabulous people and all you're doing, and the nuggets that you gave me personally. I know everyone in attendance, and then when they see this virtually, will hopefully feel the same way. But I just want to thank Simone, Michael, and Roberto for your time today, everything that you shared. We are going to be able to go out into breakout rooms, so everyone in the audience can head to a breakout room to further talk for a couple more minutes with each one of the people that were participating tonight. And just a little plug for the UConn alumni, be sure to check out the UConn alumni calendar for other opportunities. I would say for everyone that's on this is your connection to the four of us now, to send an email, to find us on LinkedIn, to build us into your network somehow if we can be of help. But there are so many other people in the UConn alumni network that want to pour in, because we have the commonality of the Huskies and Storrs, Connecticut, and value our education and the time that we had there. So please make sure that that's a common connection and use that accordingly. And I just wish everyone a great night, and thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you in the breakout rooms.